Good. Good morning, everyone. So the other week, last Saturday actually, which it seems bizarre because it was really hot last Saturday, but suddenly it's turned into winter almost overnight. I was walking through the park near us, so we live right on Wandsworth Common, and I was walking around and I was watching like the squirrels beavering away, and it was like they were getting ready. The squirrels beaver? I don't know. Anyway, they were like getting ready, and it was like they were getting ready for hibernation. And I felt the Lord say to me, this is a word for ChristChurch. But it's not that it's a time to go into hibernation, it's a time to come out of hibernation. And yes, and I was like, oh wow, that's cool. And then I thought, but you know what, I think ChristChurch has had a really tough time. And I know so many of us, in the vacancy, but not just that, it's been a tough time for a lot of us individually as well. It's been a tough few years. We've had COVID, we've had the cost of living crisis. You look at the what's going on in the news every day, and it's war, and it's people being killed, and it's devastating. I was like, God, I don't feel like that's what I'm seeing in reality. And so anyway, I did went away and did a bit of research on hibernation. And what I actually found out is I thought hibernation sounded like a really fun thing. I mean, I love the idea of just kind of hunkering down for a few months, chilling out, go away with your friends and family and just stay somewhere. But actually, when you look at it, hibernation is actually a really difficult time for animals. It's not an easy time at all. Did anyone else know that? No, it wasn't just me. So what happens is, because in hibernation, their body really slows down, they actually have to force themselves to wake up a couple of times during hibernation. And the reality is they come out of hibernation exhausted. They come out of hibernation with no energy, and it takes them a while to come back up to speed. And I was like, maybe that is the word for ChristChurch, that we're coming out of hibernation and many of us feel exhausted, many of us feel tired, but it's still time to be obedient and come into that new season, come into hibernation. And as I was praying about it and thinking about it, it reminded me of the verse in Song of Songs, which Gareth is going to put up, hopefully. No? 8 verse 5. And it says this, so, if we think of like the time of going into hibernation as that hard time, it's often in the Bible it's described as the wilderness. Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? And I felt like the Lord say to ChristChurch, well done, ChristChurch, you're coming out of that wilderness, you're coming out of the hibernation, and you've learned to lean on your beloved in that time. You're coming out and you're leaning on him, and that's what I wanted to teach you. And then I got excited because actually, not to go into too much detail, but apparently a lot of animals come out of hibernation and the first thing they do is they go and reproduce. They have this desire that means they need to go and kind of produce more family. And I thought, actually, what about that for us? That as we come out of hibernation, it's a time for us to come out leaning on our beloved, but go and reproduce, go and bring our friends to church, go and let people know about Jesus. And so it's off of that word that I'm going to go into one of the parables. So we're doing a series called Kingdom Lens and looking at some of the stories that Jesus told. So today we're going to look at the parable of the new wineskins. But let's just, I just want to take a bit of time. Let's just be still and just after that word, let's just kind of like take a moment to mull on it. Maybe we want to place our hands on our heart, and I'm just going to pray. And maybe if you resonate with that word, if you're tired or you're weary and it has been a tough season for you, and you just want to say, you actually acknowledge that and you say, yes, Lord, I am tired, I'm weary, but actually I hear that. I hear there's a new season coming and I want to go into it. Why don't you just mutter a yes in your heart? Jesus, we want to say yes to you. We want to say yes to the new season coming. As we come out of the wilderness leaning on our beloved, we say yes. And where that's a hard choice, where that feels unnatural, not like we're meant to do things, but we want to say yes because we trust you and we trust what you have for us individually and us as a church. Amen. Thank you for engaging in that. So over the summer, one thing that my wife loves to do is she loves to go on picnics with us. So there was a day a couple of months ago when it was really hot, and we were packing up our picnic. We were getting ready, And obviously, like every good person in southwest London, we had to include a smoothie in our picnic. Obviously, it had like acai, matcha, all the berries you can think of, gooseberries, raspberries. So we went out on this picnic on a really hot day, and we had a really nice time. But then we got home, and one thing we'd realized was that actually we'd forgotten to eat the smoothie. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be disastrous, not really realizing how disastrous it was going to be. But anyway, we took it home, and Emily was there putting our little daughter Iona to bed. And I was in the kitchen. And to Emily, all she explains now is she heard the most almighty bang. And then she walked into the kitchen, probably to see a scene that probably she wasn't expecting, which was like the red smoothie spread all over the kitchen, all over my white shirt, and it had gone everywhere. And what had happened was, obviously in the heat, all the berries and stuff had almost started to ferment a little bit and cause this gas. So when I went to open the lid, it had literally exploded. And this is a true story. And actually, it was so funny. But that relates to kind of the parable we're going to look at in a minute of the new wineskins. And the thing that I want to say in that story is that the container that was carrying the liquid was no longer fit for the liquid it was meant to carry. So the container was no longer ready to carry what it was asked to carry. It had changed. The liquid inside it had changed. And so the container was being asked to carry something very different. So can we pull the Matthew scripture up, please, Gareth? So here we go. We're just going to read the story. I'm going to go back a little bit because the context is important here. So Matthew 9:9-17. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Then John's disciples came and asked him, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus answered, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved." To put another way, no one puts a smoothie in the car, lets it get really hot, and then opens it in their kitchen with a white shirt on. So just so we've got the context here, because it's important what's going on, is they're sitting in Matthew's house. So Matthew has just had his call from Jesus. And Jesus has gone to him and he said, "Matthew, follow me." And there's two things that happens here, and we're not going to have time to spend too much time on them. But Matthew rose and followed him. It wasn't complicated. He was obedient and he did it quickly. And I think there's something for us to learn in that Matthew was obedient and he was obedient quickly. It would have been costly. He was a tax collector. He earned loads, but he was obedient and then he did it quickly. And we know from the other gospels that also share this story. Interestingly, Matthew doesn't reference it that it was his house. But what happened was Matthew, after that point, invited all his friends round to come and hear Jesus, to come for dinner with Jesus. And obviously, given that Matthew had been a tax collector, he probably spent his money where he shouldn't be spending his money. And so a lot of the people he would have invited would have been perhaps different to those that you would normally have seen in the synagogue, i.e. normally different people to those that Jesus should have, in the Pharisees' eyes, been hanging out with. And so what we have is then we have two groups of people. So there's two main groups of people here that then come and ask Jesus questions as Jesus is sat there fasting with his new friends, really. And the problem that the Pharisees had is that they had seen Jesus doing something very different to what they were taught to do. So does anyone know how many times, according to the Old Testament, you were meant to fast? How many days a year? Anyone got this? Does the vicar know? Anyone else? No. So they're meant to fast 1 day a year was what the Old Testament commanded. But the Pharisees had introduced these new rules that meant that they actually had started fasting on a Monday and a Thursday. So what had happened was the Pharisees had introduced their own laws and their own rules to try and make them closer to Jesus. They thought it was what God wanted to do that. And as part of that as well, they come into this mindset that actually, to also make us really holy and really clean, we shouldn't be spending time with those people that are unclean, with the people that are around us. And so instead you get this group of the Pharisees that they kind of sit around with themselves all the time, and they fast regularly, and they won't go near the unclean people. And so they come to Jesus and say, why is your teacher sitting here with all these people, all these unclean people? That's not how a rabbi, Jesus, should be spending his time. That's not how we've taught them, how we've trained them. And Jesus says, and he quotes Hosea here, he says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And for those of you that don't know the story of Hosea, Hosea is a story in the Old Testament. Hosea was a prophet. And God said to Hosea, you need to go and marry a prostitute called Gomer. And so Hosea went to marry this prostitute called Gomer, and she basically ran off and cheated on him time and time again. She kind of went for anything that moved, really. She just kept cheating on him persistently. And Hosea used this, and God used this as a picture of how God's people have been unfaithful to the Lord time and time again. But in the story, Hosea keeps coming back to Gomer, keeps coming back, keeps loving, keeps pouring out. And what Jesus is really saying to the Pharisees here is, I've been pursuing you. God's been pursuing you, but you keep missing it. I've been pursuing you time and time again, like Hosea pursued Gomer. And you're missing the real point here. With all your fasting, with all these rules that you won't go and sit with other people, you're missing the real point. You're missing what I'm here for. And that is that I've come to pursue you. I love you. And the disciples and the Pharisees were missing it. And I wonder if there's a message in that for us, that no matter how well we know the Old Testament, and the Pharisees would have known it so well, that we sometimes miss that actually at its core, what the gospel is about a God that wants to pursue each person in this room, a God that wants to pursue and has pursued every person in your workplace, every child at your daughter and son's school, every person. God is saying, I pursue you, I pursue you. The Pharisees missed it because they became so obsessed with rules. So many of people in the world miss it. And even some Christians actually miss the real point because they come up with all these rules. So here's one of kind of my key takeaways today is don't miss that. Don't ever run away from that. The fact that there is a God out there who is relentlessly pursuing you, no matter what you do, no matter how you might mess up or make mistakes. And then the second group of people, as I said, there are two groups of people. We've got the Pharisees, they come and ask a question. And then we get the John's disciples come and ask a question of Jesus. Now, this is interesting because obviously, I think to our minds, John's disciples were probably pretty good people. John the Baptist had already said to Jesus and in front of his disciples, I must decrease so that he can increase. He pointed the way that Jesus was the Son of God. And his disciples would have known that at the time, but they missed it. And so once again here, we've got a group that actually were so, they got it. They got it at one level that Jesus was someone special, but then they were still able to miss it. And so this is really, Jesus, when he comes to share the parable, is kind of preaching to people that have almost missed the point. And so what do John's disciples say? They say, why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples don't fast? I don't know that if anyone here has fasted, but probably, I think one of the worst things that happens when you fast, particularly if you say you go into work or you go and see friends, is they eat in front of you. It's a nightmare. And that's what's happened here. In essence, John's disciples are seeing people who are meant to be fasting in these made-up rules, feasting. But this is what Jesus wants to set right. And he sets it right with sort of three analogies. We're only going to have time to focus on one of them. But in your small groups this week, there's a chance to kind of unpack some of the other parables that Jesus says. But one of the example Jesus says is, neither is new wine put into old wineskins. If it is, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved. So just a quick lesson in wineskins. You're getting good education today, aren't you? Hibernation, wineskins. But in those days, wineskins would have been made out of animal skin. So what they would have generally done is they'd have taken an animal, obviously once the animal was dead, and they would have turned the skin of the animal inside out, and then they would have sewn it up, and they'd have put a hole in the top so that the wine could be held by the wineskin. And they'd have left the wineskin out to dry. Obviously, it probably was a bit messy, to let it dry in the sun. And then what would happen is they'd put wine into the wineskin. And when it was a new wineskin, the wineskin would have adapted to the shape of the wine. The gas that would have emitted during the fermentation would have kind of been able to be absorbed by this new fresh wineskin. But what would have happened if you'd used old wineskins? The old wineskins, by the time they've been in the sun, by the time they've dried out and been used for other wine, they become brittle and hard. They can't adapt to the liquid that's inside it. And so what Jesus is saying here is that actually, if you're going to be part of the new covenant, part of my people, then actually we can't be putting the new wine, the new stuff that God is pouring out. It doesn't work with the old way of doing things. There isn't like a hybrid here. I can't pour new wine out into old wineskins, into your old religious laws, into your old structures, into the old stuff you were doing. I need people that are new wineskins. I need people that are going to adjust and bend to the shape of the wine. Because the message is that actually it should never be, and it can't be, the wineskin that determines the shape of the wine. It's always the wine that determines the shape of the wineskin. And I think too often that's where we sometimes go wrong, is we think we're the wine determining the wineskin. But actually the way Jesus always had it was that we're the wineskin, and the wine inside it is meant to determine the shape we are. And what Jesus is looking for, and I think the question he has for you today as we come out, and you know that word of hibernation and come into a new season, is where are my wineskins in ChristChurch? Where are the new wineskins? Where are the people that are going to seek the Lord and ask him, what do I need to be in this season? What does my wineskin look like? Make me into that wineskin you want, Lord, so that I can carry your new wine. Can we put up Amos, please, Gareth? The days are coming, declares the Lord, when the reaper will be overtaken by the plowman and the planter by one treading grapes. New wine will drip from the mountains and flow from all the hills, and I will bring my people from Israel back from exile. New wine was always a sign of blessing and abundance in the Bible, in the Old Testament. When there were times of exile and famine and hard times, often the Bible talks about the wine being taken away, the grapes would dry up, the vineyards wouldn't flow. But new seasons and abundance was kind of signified by wine being poured out. And so if God, and what I believe he's saying is there's new wine I've got to pour out, but I need the new wineskins that are ready to take that wine. I need the people that are going to say yes and become those new wineskins, let themselves adapt to the shape of the wine so that I can pour out and I can do my new thing. I can do what I'm doing. If we look at the very start, go back to what happened at the start. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose up and followed him. So what do I think it means to be a new wineskin? Well, there's part of it that, Jesus says we've got to know the times and the seasons. We've got to understand what's going on. And there's a call in here for you to seek that for your life and ask the Lord, what is it? What is the wineskin that I need to be now? But I think there's two things we see in Matthew's response to Jesus that will always be true of any wineskin. First of all, they listen to Jesus, and then they do it quickly. They're obedient, and they do it quickly. And so whatever it is, whatever you hear the Lord tell you in terms of wineskin, how he wants you to mold, how he wants you to become the new, be obedient and do it quickly. Listen to what he says. As we come out of that time of hibernation, we might be leaning on our lover because we're tired, because we're exhausted. But the Lord is saying, I have got a new season. There's new wine I want to pour out on you. There's abundance. It's no longer scarcity. In fact, some of the hard things going on in this world, that's actually an opportunity for me to turn it for good. But I need my new wineskins in the church to rise up and take that wine and carry out to my broken world. And I think what we go on, and I love it, sort of, if you sort of read Matthew, you see that we've had the Sermon of the Mount, then we have this, and we see these kind of things where Jesus, he preaches and then he practices. So he shares something and then he goes and puts it into practice. And if we read on a little bit, if just really, really quickly, it goes on to say, he gets interrupted when he's at this dinner. And it goes on and says, while he was saying these things to them, a ruler came to him and knelt before him, saying, my daughter has just died. So Jesus, having just preached about a new covenant, then goes and puts it into practice. And I think that's part of what will signify the new wineskins in this season, is that we do both. We both preach and we practice. And what happens is and when Jesus, then we skip on and goes, and when Jesus came to the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, go away, for the girl is not dead by sleeping. They laughed at him, but when the crowd had been put outside, he went in, took her by the hand, and the girl arose. So we know when we're being new wineskins because people take attention. People had already come to ask Jesus, why is it that your disciples are doing something so different in this season? Why are they feasting, not fasting? But that's because Jesus was saying, I'm doing something new. There's something more important going on, and I'm going to mold my wineskins today, mold to the new thing that I'm doing, the new wine that's being poured out. And what I love, there's that word, isn't there? Jesus turned up at the house and the crowd were making a commotion. There is commotion going on around us. There's commotion maybe in your families, maybe in, something internally. In the world, there is commotion. And Jesus sent them away and he said, the girl is not dead by sleep, but sleeping. And part of us as we become the new wineskins, we'll see that commotion turn. We'll see the commotion turn to peace. We'll see the dead turn to sleeping and life. And that is what part of being the new wineskin is about. It's about letting ourselves mold into that wineskin, letting the wine, Jesus, as he pours his Holy Spirit and his love out, letting us mold into that shape and be the wineskin that God is calling us to be, not the other way around.